Fix or repair daily. Cute. These 7 Fords turned the joke into a relic. 500,000 miles, original bones still clocking in. Today, we're counting down the forgotten models. Proof that when Ford wanted unkillable, it delivered. Number 7. Ford Taurus SHO. Did you know Ford launched a 4-door family car in 1989 that could humiliate sports cars? Well, it looked like the kind of sedan your dad would drive to work, but underneath that buttoned-up exterior lived an engine that absolutely did not belong in an average commuter car. This was the Ford Taurus SHO, a car that showed up in khakis and loafers, but secretly bench-pressed 300 pounds before breakfast. Now, let's set the scene. The regular Taurus was already Ford's golden child in the late 80s. It was practical, aerodynamic, wildly successful, and responsible for saving Ford's bacon at a time when American sedans were starting to feel outdated. Families really loved it, but somebody inside Ford had the brilliant idea. What if we made one that could dust a Camaro at a stoplight while still carrying groceries? And just like that, the Taurus SHO was born. But here's where the story gets even juicier. Instead of giving it the usual burly American V8, Ford went knocking on Yamaha's door. With a smile on their faces, Yamaha built them a 3.0-liter V6 with dual overhead cams, 24 valves, and a 7,000 RPM redline. Oh, and this thing loved to scream, and it made 220 horsepower back when that was a serious number. The engine was so silky smooth and rev-happy, it felt like it belonged in a European sports car, not in your neighbor's beige family sedan. And Ford didn't even bother putting an automatic in it at first. Nope, 5-speed manual only. Imagine explaining that to your spouse in 1989. Honey, yes, it's a Taurus, but you need to learn to drive stick, because this thing redlines like a Yamaha superbike. With a 0 to 60 time of about 6.6 seconds, it was quicker than base Camaros and even certain BMW. The best part? It still had all the Taurus practicality. Big trunk, comfy back seat, decent ride quality. But why don't we hear more about it today? Simple. Ford barely marketed it. To most people, it was just another Taurus, and many ended up with owners who had no clue what they were driving. The Yamaha V6 was tough, but like any high-performance engine, it needed care. Too many were neglected and driven into the ground. The Taurus SHO was a hidden gem, but the next Ford is the definition of enduring legend. Number 6. Falcon XB-GT. Did you know Ford once built a muscle car that wasn't even American, but could still turn heads faster than a burnout at a stoplight? Meet the Falcon XB-GT, an Australian creation that proved Ford muscle didn't need Detroit zip codes to be legendary. Now, when you think of Ford muscle, your brain probably defaults to the Mustang. Fair enough, it's the global icon. But down in Australia during the 1970s, the Falcon XB-GT was the car to have. And it wasn't some watered-down knockoff either. This was a homegrown beast with its own bodywork, its own swagger, and an attitude that made Aussies proud. To them, it was as iconic as a Mustang or Charger. To everyone else, it was like spotting a kangaroo in rush hour traffic, rare, exotic, and impossible to ignore. And the looks? Let's just say Ford wasn't pulling punches. The XB-GT had all the right muscle car proportions. Long hood, sloping fastback roofline, wide stance. Even meaner with that big V8 rumbling under the hood. In fact, some enthusiasts argue it was better looking than the Mustangs of the same era. Bold words, but when you see those sharp lines and aggressive curves, it's hard to disagree. And of course, muscle cars live or die by what's under the hood. The Falcon XB-GT packed a 351 Cleveland V8, 300 horsepower, and 380 pound-feet of torque. And here's the twist. While American muscle was getting choked out by emissions rules, the Aussie XB-GT wasn't playing by those restrictions. That meant raw, unfiltered muscle, the kind you could feel in your chest on the open road. It was a highway king built for distance, not just drag strips. But here's where the Falcon XB-GT really stood out. It wasn't just quick, it was built to last. Australia isn't exactly known for smooth Sunday drives. It's known for long, punishing drives across rough terrain, endless highways, and weather that can fry an egg on the hood. And if you're wondering how the rest of the world found out about this Aussie legend, look no further than the movie Mad Max. That sinister black coupe roaring across the wasteland? Yep, that was a Falcon XB-GT dressed up as the iconic Pursuit Special. Overnight, the car went from Aussie cult favorite to worldwide movie star. Number 5. Ford Maverick. Picture this, it's 1970. You walk into a Ford dealership with stars in your eyes, dreaming of a Mustang and about $2,000 in your pocket. But then, reality hits. The salesman hands you the keys to a 4-cylinder Ford Maverick. Your jaw drops. This is my Mustang. Yet, despite that initial disappointment, the Maverick has a quiet charm of its own. What it lacked in muscle, it more than made up for in stubborn endurance. You see, Ford was facing fierce competition from foreign sedans like Datsun 510 and Toyota Celicus in the 1960s. It had to act fast, and this is where the automaker decided to launch Ford Maverick. Ford went as far as calling it an import killer. And remarkably, the strategy worked better than anyone expected. Nearly 579,000 people drove one home in 1970 alone. So even while Mustang dreams dazzled the nation, the Maverick was quietly carving out a reputation for lasting longer and costing less. Under the hood, the Maverick started with a 2.8-liter inline-six, ideal for smooth, no-nonsense cruising, with an optional 3.3-liter six for those who wanted a little more pep. Ford later offered a 4.1-liter six, and the final act involved offering a 4.9-liter Windsor V8 delivering 210 horsepower. All the engines weren't designed to dominate the track, but they did dominate reliability. Rear-wheel drive, simple transmission, zero drama. Driving the Maverick felt like having a loyal dog that somehow looked effortlessly cool. But a car isn't just measured by sales, it's measured by how long it sticks around. Take an example of the 1972 Maverick. The story goes that its owner's father won it in a poker game. No joke. And decades later, this same Maverick racked up almost 300,000 miles. The only maintenance? Oil changes, spark plugs, and freeze-out plugs. That's it. Talk about winning at life. And cars. And if you thought practicality meant it couldn't turn heads, think again. The Maverick's long hood, short deck, and subtle Mustang cues gave it a sporty vibe that made rolling up to a drive-thru feel rebellious, even without leaving second gear. Best of all, it was affordable. At just $1,995, around $17,000 in today's money, over 7 years, more than 2 million Mavericks quietly did their thing, until Ford replaced it with the Fairmont, and most people forgot this little underdog even existed. Number 4. Ford Probe. Did you know that Ford once made a sporty coupe that was supposed to replace the Mustang, but ended up becoming its own weird, underrated legend? Back in the late 80s and early 90s, owning a sporty coupe was basically a fashion statement. Every manufacturer was fighting for attention. The Porsche 944 looked classy, the Nissan 300ZX was fiery, and the Volkswagen Corrado screamed, "I have good taste in a turbo." Ford didn't want to be left out of this trend, so with a little help from Mazda, they cooked up the Probe. Originally drafted as a Mustang replacement, it somehow evolved into something all its own, a sleek aerodynamic machine with pop-up headlights, ready to impress the neighbors without costing your life savings. But just because it looked the part didn't mean everyone was on board. When it launched, purists scoffed, front-wheel drive, Japanese parts, and nearly replacing the Mustang. The Probe never shook off that almost Mustang stigma, and the name didn't help either. But behind the jokes and criticism, it was a dependable, practical coupe that handled daily miles without complaint. Here's the thing most people missed. The Probe wasn't about raw flash, it was about how ridiculously easy it was to live with. Mazda engineering made it cheap to run and cheap to maintain, and yet it still felt surprisingly refined. Deeply bolstered seats, a moonroof, and even a CD player in the early 90s gave it an edge in comfort, while a roomy hatch and usable back seats made it more practical than most sporty coupes dared to be. Sure, Ford offered a lineup of engines, but one in particular cemented its reputation. The 3.0-liter V6. It didn't chase records, but with simple care. Oil changes, spark plugs, the basics. It would rack up hundreds of thousands of miles without breaking a sweat. Before we reveal the final 3, don't forget to hit the like button and comment below which underrated Ford classic you love the most. Number 3. Ford F-250 and F-350. Imagine telling your friends your truck runs on the same stuff McDonald's fries are cooked in. They'd laugh, call you crazy, and then watch in shock as your old Ford F-250 clattered to life on nothing but fryer grease. That's not a myth. That's the reality of Ford's late 80s and early 90s workhorses, the F-250 and F-350 diesels. These trucks weren't built for comfort. They weren't built for speed. They were built to outlive their owners, one oil change at a time. But a truck doesn't just earn that kind of reputation by accident. There had to be something special beating at its heart, and there was. Tucked under the hood was the 6.9-liter, later the legendary 7.3-liter IDI diesel, engines not dreamed up by Ford's marketing department, but borrowed straight from International Harvester. Yep, these were the same folks who made tractors and farm machines tough enough to survive generations. And let's be honest, they weren't glamorous. The 7.3 sounded like a generator chewing on rocks. Step on the gas and you had enough time to recite the alphabet before hitting 60. But if you needed to haul a trailer, drag a stump, or move a barn across the field, the IDI just grumbled, "Sure thing," and did it. But what really made it a legend wasn't how it moved, but how little it asked for in return. Forget fragile sensors and computer gremlins. This thing had zero patience for modern nonsense. Break something? You didn't book an appointment at a dealership. You grabbed a wrench, a $500 rebuild kit, maybe a little duct tape, and you were back in business. Owners didn't brag about 100,000 or 200,000 miles. They casually mentioned 500,000. One guy swore he ran on straight vegetable oil for years, and the only thing that suffered was everyone around him suddenly craving French fries. Number 2. Mercury Cougar. The first-generation Mercury Cougar is one of those cars that somehow slipped through the cracks of history. Ask most people about late 60s muscle cars, and they'll rattle off Mustangs, Camaros, or Chargers. But the Cougar, it was more like that one cousin who showed up to the family reunion wearing a leather jacket and a gold watch. Cool enough to impress the kids, fancy enough to make the adults nod in approval. And that cool yet classy reputation wasn't just by accident. When it debuted in 1967, Mercury pitched the Cougar as a gentleman's muscle car. That was their whole thing. Muscle car performance wrapped in a slightly more refined, luxurious package. The marketing basically said, if you love the Mustang but want something more grown up, this is your car. And they weren't kidding. Slide inside a Cougar, and you didn't just get bare-bones vinyl and a speedometer. You got carpeting, front armrests, and if you sprung for the XR7 package, faux wood trim, leather accents, and a walnut steering wheel. It was as if Mercury had asked, what if a muscle car could double as your living room? But of course, all that luxury would have been meaningless if the Cougar couldn't back it up where it really counted, under the hood. And this is where Mercury proved it wasn't messing around. From day one, they didn't even bother offering 6 cylinders. Nope, V8s only. The entry-level 289 was solid, but things escalated quickly. By 1968, you could get a 302, a 390, and even a Marauder 390 GT that pumped out over 320 horsepower. Then came the real heavy hitters, the Eliminator with its Boss 302, and the legendary 428 Cobra Jet, which basically turned the Cougar into a lion that had just discovered Red Bull. Still, raw power wasn't the Cougar's only trick. What really makes it worthy of this list is how well it endured. These cars weren't fragile hot rods that needed babying. They were tough, overbuilt V8 machines that just kept on ticking. Owners discovered they could rack up hundreds of thousands of miles with nothing more than oil and gas. Even decades later, people were daily driving their Cougars long after other muscle cars had been retired to weekend-only duty. All of this makes Cougar the most underrated muscle car of the 60s. Number 1. Ford Bronco. In the mid-1960s, while Ford was busy cranking out Mustangs and muscle cars for the street, someone in management had a different idea. What if Ford built something that didn't just go fast in a straight line, but could climb over rocks, plow through mud, and still be civilized enough to drive into town? That question gave birth to the first Ford Bronco in 1965, a rugged little box on wheels that set the stage for the modern SUV before SUV was even a household word. Here's the thing. This wasn't some random light bulb moment. Ford already had the blueprint from World War II, when it built military Jeeps that proved just how capable small 4x4s could be. After the war, people wanted a civilian version, something with toughness but without the bone-rattling punishment. That demand became the Bronco's mission. Internally, Ford engineers even nicknamed it the GOAT, short for Goes Over Any Terrain. And in this case, the name wasn't marketing fluff, it was a promise. And to keep that promise, the Bronco couldn't just be a repurposed pickup or sedan. So Ford gave it a dedicated chassis, purpose-built to be compact, durable, and highly capable. Under the hood, buyers got options: a thrifty inline-six or a small block V8, both paired with a Dana 20 transfer case that let drivers shift into four-wheel drive on the fly. But here's where Ford really nailed it. The Bronco wasn't just for hardcore off-roaders. Priced a little over $2,000 brand new, it was within reach for everyday people. That meant you could drive it to work during the week, then take it hunting, surfing, or trail riding on the weekend. We hope you enjoyed this video. Here's another one you won't want to miss. As always, thanks for watching.